The skies of Krylora were a canvas of shifting gray, a realm where even the clouds moved like frozen ash, too heavy for wind. Beneath them, the ice stretched unbroken to the edge of sight. No forests, no mountains, just the endless white hush of death. In the far northern quadrant, beyond the fireline crevasse and the memory of warmth, the tribe of Terran had gathered beneath the crystal obelisk, known as the Frostfang. A sentencing was underway. Princess Zara knelt in the snow, her bare knees searing from the cold, her breath catching in ragged clouds. She wore the ceremonial silks of dishonor, thin, nearly translucent garments that offered no insulation, designed to humiliate, not to shield. Her wrists were bound with ice-fine twine, the same kind used to drag criminals through the tundra. Around her stood the elders, faces hidden behind their furred hoods and mirrored veils. Only her father, the High Chieftain Varnock, stood without covering. His eyes not cold but void, deep wells where her reflection did not appear. "You have disgraced the line of Thrain," he said, voice clipped, devoid of emotion. "You defied the spiral path. You gave sanctuary to an outsider when silence was the law." Zara's voice cracked. "He was dying, a scout, a child." "That child carried Terran blood," Varnock replied. "And by bringing him past our gate, you brought poison into the core." A ripple of murmurs swept the crowd, none of them sympathetic, none daring to speak her name aloud. "I saved a life," she said, throat raw. "Is mercy now treason?" Her father's eyes narrowed. "Mercy is for the strong. You have made us weak." And with that, the sentence was cast. The warriors came without a word. Two of them unbound her wrists, not in kindness but ceremony. Then they turned, walking away, leaving her kneeling in the snow. The crowd dispersed like mist, silent and organized, vanishing into the snow tunnels that led back to the inner sanctum. She stood slowly, alone now, her legs trembling beneath her. The wind picked up like a whip. It was done. Exile. No food, no light, no shelter. On Krylora it was not execution, but nature would finish the work. An ancient method. A clean method. Zara stumbled into the wind, blinking as frost gathered on her lashes. Her wings, once radiant with thermal light, had been clipped days before. They drooped now like folded parchment, stripped of color and strength. Her fingers, turning numb, traced the faint scars on their edges. Every breath burned. Every step was a prayer. But she walked, into the white, until she vanished from the tribe's sight and entered the part of the planet they had long ago written off as uninhabitable, where the stars never shined, where no one ever returned. Captain Eli Stanton had never believed in fate, but Krylora made him wonder. He'd been 5 days out from the Andari Gate, running a solo scan mission aboard the Vulture Hawk, a vessel that had once been military-grade, but now mostly held sensor crates and stubborn grease. His orders were simple. Chart cryogenic tectonic shifts on unclaimed moons for future Terran mining rights. No combat, no diplomacy, just ice and data. Krylora hadn't even been on the manifest, but a seismic anomaly near the polar curve had drawn his curiosity. The planet showed no signs of civilization in the current cycle, though older satellite reports had suggested ancient heat sources buried under the glaciers. When he dropped into orbit, nothing pinged on the scanner except cold static, until a single biological signal sparked into view. It was faint, flickering, just a blip lost in the swirl of magnetic noise. He leaned over the console, running a second scan. It remained. Human? No. Too distorted. The genetic readout carried multiple strands of unknown coding, complex, elegant, reactive to pressure. Then the signal began to fade. He didn't think. He moved. With no clearance request and only half a plan, Eli dropped into the lower atmosphere in a descent pod, armored and retrofitted for extreme cold. The friction made the sky burn briefly orange, then blue, then white again as he plummeted into the planet's hellish storm belt. He landed hard on a glacial ridge, his boots crunching onto ice that cracked beneath his weight. Visibility was nearly zero. The HUD in his visor tracked heat patterns in every direction. Nothing. Then a whisper of movement to the east. He trudged forward, wind slashing across his visor. Minutes passed, then more, until he saw her. At first, she looked like a mirage, half buried in snow, her body curled inward, skin glowing faintly beneath the frost. Her hair, pale lavender and stuck with shards of ice, waved slightly in the wind. She did not move. Eli dropped beside her, removing his thermal pack, already unsealing the emergency sealant. He touched her neck, still warm. Barely. "Hey," he said through chattering teeth. Come on, stay with me. Her eyelids fluttered, and he caught a glimpse of her eyes, silver, alien, and afraid. She whispered something in a language he didn't recognize. He didn't need to. I've got you, he said. Gently but with practiced speed, he lifted her into his arms and turned back toward the descent pod. Every step felt longer than the last. She was light, but the weight of her presence pressed into him like history. By the time he made it back, frostbite was already threatening his fingers. But she was still breathing. Inside the pod, he wrapped her in emergency gel, activated the return beacon, and sealed the hatch. As the pod lifted back into orbit, Eli looked down at the girl on his medbed, fragile, marked by a culture he didn't know, abandoned on a planet no one had touched in 100 years. Who was she? Why was she left here? And why, when he looked at her, did it feel like the cold around them wasn't the worst thing this galaxy could throw at them? He didn't know the answers, but he was going to find them. Even if it meant freezing hell over again. The medbay of the Vulture Hawk was not meant for royalty. It was a stripped-down emergency unit repurposed from an old Terran escort frigate, still bearing the scratched initials of its prior owner on the wall. May the void take the rest. Cold, metallic, practical. But at that moment, it was warmer than anything Zara had known in days. She awoke slowly as though surfing from beneath a frozen ocean. Her skin tingled with artificial heat, the synthetic gel stitched into her bloodstream pulsing life back into her extremities. Her wings, once clipped and dulled, had been wrapped in transparent insulation. She couldn't feel them yet, but they weren't gone. Not entirely. Eli sat beside her, hunched over a monitor, his hair damp from melting frost, his fingers stained with coolant from patching a ruptured thruster line. He hadn't slept. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with red, but his focus never left the vitals scrolling across the screen. When she stirred, his head snapped around. Hey, he said, voice hoarse. Welcome back. Zara blinked, disoriented. She tried to sit up, but immediately grimaced. Easy, he said, stepping closer, placing a hand against her shoulder. You're safe. You're aboard a Terran survey vessel, orbiting your planet. Name's Eli Stanton. Her throat ached. When she tried to speak, it came out as a ragged whisper in her native tongue. Eli frowned. Language barrier. Great. She stared at him, the realization settling in slowly. He was human. Tall, with rugged skin, wind-cut features, and eyes the color of a dying star. Burnt gold, but tired. His presence made no sense. The Terrans hadn't set foot on Krylora in decades, not since the Treaty of Icefall. Her people had closed the sky. Why was he here? She tried again, this time in the fractured common tongue used in old diplomatic accords. You found me? He nodded. Caught your life signature by accident. You were freezing to death in a snowbank. Any longer, and I'd be talking to a corpse. Zara winced at the bluntness of his words, but there was no cruelty in them, just fact. I am Zara, she said slowly, first daughter of Terran's bloodline. Eli raised an eyebrow. Royalty? She nodded once. Or I was. He sat back against the bulkhead, exhaling. Well, I guess I've picked up my fair share of misfits and martyrs, but this might be a first. Zara closed her eyes briefly. They left me. He didn't ask who. He could see the pain in her face, the stubborn way she held back the shame. He had seen it before, in soldiers who had been given impossible orders, in refugees from shattered colonies. They said I broke tradition, that I polluted our purity, because I showed mercy. Eli's jaw tightened. Mercy's the first thing people forget when they start pretending they're gods. She opened her eyes, surprised. There was no mockery in his voice. Only empathy, buried beneath sarcasm and steel, but real. I will not return to them, she said softly. Didn't plan on dropping you off, Eli replied. Figured you'd be safer with me, unless you'd rather I do otherwise. Zara studied him. He did not bow, did not flatter, did not worship her title. Yet he had carried her, saved her, warmed her, without asking for anything in return. No, she said, I trust you. He stood. Then you'll need strength and something warmer than ceremonial robes. She allowed herself the smallest smile as he tossed a folded flight jacket onto the bed. Try not to get frostbite again, he said over his shoulder. That stuff's a pain to fix. Zara was walking again by the third day. Her steps were weak, her balance unsteady, but she moved with the quiet poise of someone raised to never show weakness, even as her legs betrayed her. The corridors of the Vulture Hawk were narrow, rust stained in corners, the air recycled with a faint tang of old circuits and engine grease. She traced her fingers along the walls as she walked, grounding herself in this foreign metal beast that now floated between her and the world that had cast her aside. Eli was in the engine bay when she found him, waist-deep in a dismantled coolant tank, his sleeves rolled up and the flickering glow of a fusion torch lighting his grim expression. He didn't notice her at first. His mind was locked in the quiet rhythm of repair, a language he knew better than politics or prophecy. Zara cleared her throat gently. He looked up, startled, then grinned. "Didn't think you'd be on your feet yet." "I tire of lying still," she replied. "I feel like a stone waiting to be buried." Eli stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're more alive than half the people I've met in the inner colonies." Zara tilted her head. "You speak as if you've seen much." He shrugged. "War does that." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You fought?" Eli hesitated. "Long time ago, different front, didn't end well. Now I scan frozen rocks for a living." She watched him for a moment, sensing the weight behind his words. He carried scars, but not the kind that bled. The kind that whispered at night when the lights were low. "Will you show me how to fly this machine?" she asked suddenly. Eli blinked. "You want to fly the Hawk?" "I need to learn something new," she said. "To forget what they tried to make of me." He nodded after a moment. "All right, you break it, you fix it." In the cockpit, she marveled at the galaxy through reinforced glass, the stars no longer distant gods but reachable fire. Eli walked her through the controls, throttle, navigation, diagnostics, explaining each function with patient detail. She absorbed it quickly. Her kind were born with memory webs in their blood. What took humans weeks, she learned in days. At one point, as she guided the ship through a low-orbit maneuver, Eli watched her with a strange expression. "What is it?" she asked, steadying the controls. "You smile when you're not thinking," he said. "I didn't think you knew how." Zara touched her lips, almost startled by the warmth there. Then laughed softly. "I had forgotten, until now." The laughter faded into quiet. Eli leaned forward, lowering the main thruster. "So, what now, princess?" She stared ahead at the stars. "I don't know, but I won't be frozen anymore." "No," Eli said, "you won't." They drifted in silence for a while longer, and somewhere in that silence, the bond between them began to form. Not of rescue or gratitude or even rebellion, but of something colder and stronger than both. Survival, and the fire that follows it. The Vulture Hawk orbited just above Krylora's twilight belt, where the glaciers gave way to crystalline ridges and canyons too deep to echo. Zara sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands resting on the navigation display, eyes locked on the planet's surface as if trying to extract its secrets through sheer will. "I want to return," she said, voice low, eyes unwavering. Eli paused mid-bite of a protein ration bar. He leaned back in his chair, setting the wrapper aside. "To Krylora? To the ice cleft. To the outer sanctum where they left me. There's something I need to see." Eli regarded her for a long moment. The bruises had faded from her skin, but the ache remained behind her eyes. "That's not the safest idea," he said carefully. "Your people didn't exactly roll out a carpet when they left you to freeze. They won't know I'm there. I won't speak to them." "But I have to go back," she said, then turned toward him, her voice tightening. There was a small chamber beneath the obelisk of wormglass, a cryo-vault. I was guarding it when the accusations started. Inside, there was a data thread, an ancestral recording. "I believe it holds the truth." "The truth about your exile?" Eli asked. "No," she said. "The truth about what really happened with the Terran child. The one I was punished for saving." Eli stood, pacing slightly, torn between caution and instinct. He had grown used to dangerous decisions. The military had trained that into him. But this wasn't just recon. If the wrong eyes spotted them, it wouldn't be data they were fighting for. It would be survival. He looked at her. "All right, we go in at night. Land beneath the cliffs. You lead me straight to that vault. We get the recording, and we get the hell out." Zara nodded. "I'll take nothing but what's mine." The descent was cloaked. Eli's old smuggling protocols kicked in, shrouding the Hawk in thermal distortion and magnetized snow scatter. They dropped beneath the radar of the Terran sentries, settling the ship behind a jagged cliff wall. Outside, the air bit like needles. Even with thermal suits, the cold crept into bone. But Zara didn't flinch. She moved ahead, wings wrapped beneath her insulated cloak, guiding him through the frozen valley she knew too well. The sanctum was just as she remembered, an arch of cracked stone, half buried in snowdrift, with glyphs pulsing faintly under layers of frost. She placed her palm against the wall. The ice lit from within and parted. Eli followed her down into the vault. The walls shimmered with blue energy, silent but watchful. At the far end, suspended in a stasis cradle of crystalline tendrils, hovered a narrow, glowing thread, a ribbon of light encoded with layered memory, visible only to Terran blood. Zara stepped forward, fingers trembling, and placed her hand inside the interface. A hum filled the chamber. The walls ignited with holograms, blurry figures shifting scenes. Eli stepped back, watching them unfold. He saw a younger Zara kneeling beside a child, a hybrid child, tending to his wounds with a gentleness that didn't match the punishment she later received. Then another image, a council elder approaching the child's body frowning. What came next made Zara gasp. The elder inserted a needle into the child's vein, and moments later, the boy stopped breathing. It hadn't been her act of mercy that violated the code, it had been their cover-up. Zara staggered back. Her breath caught in her throat. "They killed him," she whispered, "and they blamed me." Eli was already moving toward her, gripping her shoulders to steady her. "I was not exiled for mercy," she said, trembling. "I was exiled to bury their shame." The sound of boots crunching above them made Eli draw his blaster. Zara's eyes went wide. They followed. Eli moved in front of her, shielding her body with his. "How fast can you fly?" Her eyes narrowed. "Fast enough." The exit tunnel erupted in noise. 3 Terran sentries burst through the entrance, spears drawn, cloaked in thermal armor that shimmered like glass. Their weapons crackled with sub-zero pulses, meant to paralyze, not kill. Punishment, not execution. Eli fired first. The bolt struck one square in the chest, throwing him backward against the wall. The others scattered, launching arcs of freezing light that burst against the stone in jagged explosions. "Zara, go!" Eli shouted, turning and ducking behind a frozen pillar. But she didn't run. Her eyes glowed with fury. With a sharp flick of her hand, she summoned a kinetic pulse from her own neural signature, a gift of her bloodline, one she had never dared use before. It knocked the closest warrior to his knees. "You left me to die," she hissed at them. "You spat on my name, knowing the truth." The surviving sentry hesitated, his eyes behind the visor wide with disbelief. "You were not supposed to return." Eli launched forward, tackling him, disarming him with brute force. The weapon clattered across the floor. He slammed the warrior's head against the wall, and the man crumpled. Then the ground shuddered. Not from the battle, but from something deeper. Zara looked up. The vault is collapsing. The energy pulse, it's destabilized the floor. Cracks rippled across the chamber like lightning beneath glass. The ancient supports groaned, and chunks of crystal began to fall. Eli grabbed her arm. "Move." They bolted through the corridor as the world caved in behind them. Ice collapsed from the ceiling. Arcs of raw stasis energy licked at their heels. Zara stumbled once, and Eli lifted her, without breaking stride. They reached the open snowfield just as the sanctum imploded behind them in a cloud of blue-white smoke. The vulture hawk loomed ahead. Eli's remote command had already triggered the ramp. They ran. Inside, he slammed the door shut and roared, "Go!" to the onboard AI. The engines surged. The ship lifted, streaking back into the upper atmosphere. Zara collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, still shaking. Eli sat beside her, blood streaked across his cheek, hands trembling with adrenaline. "You got it?" he asked. She held up the memory crystal, its core still glowing. "I have everything." They stared at each other, breaths shallow, the adrenaline fading into realization. They hadn't just escaped exile. They had unearthed a truth buried in ice for years, and shattered the illusion her people had built atop a lie. Eli leaned back, eyes closing briefly. "Well," he said through a breath, "looks like we're not just joyriding anymore." Zara looked toward the stars. "No. Now we're starting a war." And in the silent dark above Krylora, 2 fugitives, one Terran, one castaway princess, hurtled into a galaxy that no longer had room for lies. The vulture hawk drifted in low orbit over a planet that no longer welcomed its own truth. Beneath them, Krylora spun silently, cloaked in its storm-wreathed majesty, her surface scarred and untouched in places no outsider had dared tread in decades. The stars above were sharp and still, but the ship inside was a storm of motion. Zara stood at the hollow table in the war room, a small circular space just behind the bridge, her eyes locked on the rotating schematic of Terran's capital chamber. Her hands were steady, but her wings, those beautiful alien extensions once shamed and clipped, now quivered slightly with anticipation. Eli entered, rubbing a bandage over his ribs, a half-healed reminder of the fight beneath the vault. He studied her posture. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. Neither had he. "You sure about this?" he asked, stepping beside her. Zara didn't look at him. "I have to be. The crystal contains a memory thread that proves my exile was not just wrongful. It was a weaponized lie. That child, the one I tried to save, he was targeted, silenced." "By your own blood," Eli finished. She turned slowly to him. "They murdered him to protect a crumbling ideology. I was their scapegoat." Eli nodded, folding his arms. "So what's the plan?" "We broadcast the truth, not just to the council, to the people. Every caste, every ice farmer, every priest. I want them all to hear what their leaders did." He tilted his head. "You think the people will side with you?" "No," she said plainly. "But they'll remember, and they'll doubt. And doubt is where empires start to fracture." She took a breath. "But I need one more thing." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Your voice." He blinked. He blinked. "Mine?" "You were there. You saw the vault. You fought the sentries. Your voice, your human voice, will shake the narrative more than mine ever could." Eli was silent for a long time. Then he pulled up a chair and sat beside her, arms on his knees. "You know I didn't come here for politics, Zara." "I know. I didn't sign up for revolution either." "You didn't," she agreed. He looked at her then, long and hard. "But I also didn't pull you out of that snow just to watch you go back in alone." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then stand with me now." Later that night, they broadcast the recording. Eli's ship was too small to reach interstellar frequencies, but his rig was wired with old mercenary tech, an encryption splitter that routed signals across a chain of abandoned satellites left over from the Krillora-Terran border war. He'd never used it for anything but personal scans, until now. The message was short, but surgical. Zara's voice spoke first. Her title, her bloodline, her exile. Then the video from the memory crystal played, uncut, undeniable. The child, the elder, the injection, the silence. And finally Eli's voice, plain, without flair or ceremony. "I'm Captain Eli Stanton of Earth, former Terran Navy recon. I pulled Zara out of the ice myself. I saw what they tried to bury. The truth's in your hands now. Don't look away." Then the transmission ended, and the galaxy waited. At first, there was only silence. Then came the responses. Not from the rulers, but from the people. Across Kryllora's icy territories, in cavern cities and glacier domes, the message spread. Quietly, furiously. On black market receivers, outlawed terminals, passed hand-to-hand on data sticks etched with her name. The royal family called it a fabrication. A Terran trick. But not everyone listened. Eli sat in the Hawk's galley, pouring boiling synth tea into a cracked mug. Zara stood beside the port window, watching transmissions roll in on the main console. "There," she said, pointing to one blinking symbol on the map. "That's Yaren's spire. The miners there just rejected the royal tribute collectors." Another light flickered. "That's the Frost Choir. They're refusing to sing in the capital's winter solstice rite." And another. "The Star Monks just declared neutrality for the first time in 400 years. Eli smiled grimly. "Sounds like the cracks are growing." "They are," Zara said, "but so are the threats." The retaliation was swift. The Royal Guard began tightening curfews. Search drones scoured communication lines for rebroadcast signals. Known sympathizers were questioned, detained, or worse. In one province, a resistance cell was wiped out overnight. No survivors. No explanation. Zara read every report, her eyes dry. "They're trying to burn the doubt before it takes root." Eli nodded. "And they're getting desperate." That night, as the stars wheeled slowly outside the ship, a coded message broke through the static. It came from a frequency that hadn't been used since before her exile. The voice that played was crackled, hollow, but unmistakable. It was her younger brother, Keliv. He spoke only once. "Come to the Rift Citadel. We need to talk. Alone." Zara stared at the console long after the message ended. Eli crossed his arms. "It's a trap." She turned to him. "I know. Then why consider it?" "Because he was the only one who hesitated when they sentenced me. If there's a soul in that palace who still remembers what honor feels like, it's him." Eli exhaled. "Then I'm going with you." "No," she said gently. If it is a trap, they'll expect you, but they won't expect me to come alone. Not again. He didn't move. She stepped forward, pressing her forehead against his. I need you on the outside. If I fail, you carry the fire. He swallowed. Don't say if. She smiled faintly. Then say when. And with that, she turned and walked down the corridor, her wings catching the starlight. This time, she walked into the frost not as an exile, but as a reckoning, and the ice beneath her feet didn't dare whisper her name. It listened. The rift citadel rose from the glacier like a blade of ancient judgment. Its black spires were carved into the vertical face of a canyon where two tectonic plates had split a mountain centuries ago. The wind there never stopped. It screamed down through the cleft with the howl of a dying god, tearing at banners, scouring skin from stone. For centuries, it had served as the seat of the inner court, a place of ritual, of secrets, and most recently, of betrayal. Zara approached under the twin moons, cloaked in thermal gear and veiled in a faceless mask of her own design. She moved past automated sentries using deep vein codes her brother had once whispered to her when they were children. During long nights beneath the crystal skylights of the royal nursery, she crossed the ice bridge without escort, her heart steady, her blood slow. Inside, the air was warmer, but no less hostile. Torches still burned in the old ceremonial halls, casting gold across pillars carved with her ancestors' names. She recognized none of them. Not anymore. She walked past murals that had been scrubbed clean of her face, through corridors where her footsteps once echoed with laughter. All silent now. The weight of legacy loomed around her like a tomb. At the apex chamber, the doors opened automatically, and there, standing by the firewall with hands clasped behind his back, was Kelev, her brother, now dressed in the cold garb of power. He had grown leaner, older, his eyes shadowed with something harder than grief. Zara, he said, his voice thin with disbelief. I came as you asked. He turned slowly, staring at her. You shouldn't have. I never should have been sent away, she replied, voice like steel. But here we are. They stood in the glow of the firewall, the last honest flame in the citadel. Kelev's shoulders dropped. It's worse than you know, he said. The council plans to name a new heir before the next frost cycle. They've rewritten the records. You never existed. They'll regret that, she said. I carry the truth now. The people know. The unrest has already begun. He hesitated, then stepped closer. I didn't vote for your exile. I begged Father to spare you, but once the vote passed... You said nothing, she whispered. I was afraid. Zara's jaw clenched. I wasn't. From his belt, Kelev produced a thin metal shard, a memory spike. This, he said, is the original footage from the surveillance chamber beneath the temple. It proves the council ordered the death of the hybrid child. Not just condoned it, ordered it. She took the spike, locking eyes with him. Why give this to me? Because you were right. Because our bloodline is rotting from the inside. And because... I would rather see it burn than watch you suffer one more hour for their sins. Before she could respond, an alarm screamed through the citadel. Kelev's eyes went wide. They know you're here. How? Because I was followed, he breathed. Zara turned, eyes flaring. You led them to me? No, he said, horrified. I swear I... The door exploded inwards. Royal enforcers stormed the chamber, cloaked in steel and frostlight, weapons raised. Zara dove behind the firewall as Kelev shouted for them to stand down. They didn't. A blast struck him in the shoulder, sending him spinning to the floor. Zara rolled beneath the stone dais and hurled one of Eli's ion grenades toward the doorway. It erupted in a shockwave of static, slamming 3 soldiers into the far wall. She grabbed Kelev's arm, dragging him upright. You're bleeding, he coughed. So are you. She looked down, frostburn scorched across her side, a shallow cut leaking red. No time. She keyed her calm. Eli, I need extraction now. His voice crackled through. Already en route. Hang tight. Zara and Kelev fought their way through the corridors, dodging stun bolts and collapsing debris. The citadel was falling into chaos. Half the guard had joined the hunt. The other half had simply walked away. She could feel it. The fracture was real. At the outer balcony, the Vulture Hawk descended in a roar of engines. Its landing gear shattered the obsidian railing as it came in hard and fast. The rear ramp opened mid-air. Zara shoved Kelev forward, his legs barely holding him. She turned once, scanning the burning halls behind her. the throne of her birth now a silhouette against smoke and light. She whispered to it, not a curse, not a goodbye. Then she leapt aboard and vanished into the storm. The uprising began at dawn. The citadel fires were still burning when the satellite broadcast went live. All across Kralora's inhabited sectors, city-states, mining outposts, glacier farms, hollowed sanctuaries, screens lit with Zara's face. Not as a princess, not as a myth, as a voice. She stood before a dark backdrop, wearing no crown, no armor, just her wings, full and unbowed, stretched behind her like banners of flame and frost. My name is Zara Terran, daughter of the house that buried its own shame. I was cast into the ice for saving a life. But I survived, and now I bring you the truth. She played the memory spike, the council's orders, the execution, the cover-up. There was no plea, no call to rebellion, just evidence. Then her voice again. Do with this what you will, but never again let silence be loyalty. The signal ended, but the echoes did not. Council members resigned or disappeared. Protests turned into fires. The Terran guards fractured into factions. Kralora did not fall, but it bent, finally, visibly, beneath the weight of its own lies. From orbit, Eli watched it unfold beside her. They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, the planet spinning below them like a story that had finally started telling the truth. You did it, he said softly. No, she replied. We did. He turned. So what now? Zara reached into her belt and withdrew a new memory crystal, this one blank. Now, she said, we record a future. He smiled. Sounds like work. It always is. Later, as the ship turned its nose toward the stars beyond, they stood together at the helm. Two outcasts, one born of fire, one shaped by frost. Not bound by crown or chain, but by choice. They had no map, no promise of peace, only the truth, and the will to carve a better world out of the frozen wreckage of the old. Together.